It's always so good to see you. So fun to check out backgrounds, see where everybody is. And nice to be with you again today. I'm Jennifer Patterson. I'm joined here with colleagues from ODE, Scott Nine, my co-facilitator, and Ashley and Joanna Michelle, who help keep things flowing and alive and monitor beautifully in the chat. Big thank you to them. And Dan Farley, Alexa Pearson, and Ken Greenbaum, who join us as well to lend their expertise and beautiful listening ears to all of your great questions and comments and everything that you have to contribute today. So thank you for joining us. It is May 17th, kind of hard to believe, but these are good markers in time when time seems sometimes hard to track. And as you well know, if you've joined us before, the purpose of these office hours are really to provide clarity to you around the guidance, hopefully to honor your questions and get them answered, to spark ideas when and where possible, to really anchor key ideas and values for all of us that can be really important in this time of great speed and pace and uncertainty. And also to create sort of a two-way feel of dialogue, and being in relationship and communication together really matters to us. So today, Scott and I will co-facilitate. Again, as I've named, we're joined by Ashley, Michelle, and Joanne. If you're having a technical issue or join late and need something from a link or something like that, they're wonderful and very helpful resources for us as well. So after this brief welcome, we have a couple of key topics to zoom in around. Please use the chat again for specific questions and sharing. You're so good at that, and we appreciate the dialogue and the learning that comes from you. And again, these are recorded, and so they're available for you to watch again or share with a friend. And hopefully that's helpful for you, particularly those of you who are maybe into Zoom meetings at once, which we know happens, or paying attention to some other things, or have to leave early or join late. So a couple of topics today that have surfaced, both from you and what's happened in the course of a week since we've been together last. The first, we'll briefly cover the governor's mask update that came out last Thursday, the 13th. And we'll talk briefly about how it relates to schools, of course, give you a chance to ask any clarifying questions or share feedback around that. We've got just a brief related update around graduation ceremony guidance. And then we'll talk very briefly around next year's guidance as well. And then we probably anticipate having time to open it up and pull questions and themes of yours from the chat to discuss as well. Okay, Scott, do you want to talk about this? Do you want me to go? I know he's laughing at me. I can do it. I can give it a go.
Okay, all right, you're up, and I'll follow you if needed.
How about this? I'll just read what's on the slide, and you can do all the rest. That's called strategic partnership right there, modeled in real time. So we know that there was CDC guidance released last week around mask wearing as it relates to individuals who have received the vaccinations. We know that created a lot of questions, a lot of uncertainty for many people. And in response to that, Governor Brown issued a video statement. It's linked here, and hopefully Ashley can help us also put it in the chat. But in that, okay, I was just muted. Was that on purpose? Was I saying the wrong thing?
You're crushing it. Keep going.
You get a message that says that the host muted you, and you're like, get real self-conscious real fast. So in any case, what we know is that the governor did issue new mask mandates in her message. What she also said is that it is not changing anything for schools this year, and that she expects education staff and students to continue to wear masks and physically distance as outlined in RSSL, regardless of vaccination status. So essentially what the governor was saying is for school buildings, for any school operation that is happening in person, Ready Schools, Safe Learners still holds, and the guidelines and the requirements there still hold. That includes family members, volunteers, visitors, SROs, other partners that might be part of the constellation of school in real time, in real life. And we recognize too that that's created lots of confusion for many of you in schools trying to figure out where is the line and how to hold the line. So we want to both empathize with the position that that has put school leaders in, particularly in communities who are very eager to stop wearing masks and maybe already have abandoned that practice in many of community places and spaces. We know that you're doing a lot to try to hold the line with requiring mask wearing, and that this makes it increasingly difficult to do that and hold and stand in your integrity. So we understand that that is complicated. We also know that from a public health standpoint, it's really important that we continue to wear masks because we don't have everyone that has full access to vaccines at this point yet. So I also know I was at Costco with my little girl and she was like, Mom, I've counted 21 people that are not wearing masks. So it is, it's requiring in a similar way as it took us a while to kind of socialize and pattern into mask wearing, this notion of not wearing masks around one another for some of us, particularly depending on where we live in this state, feels really confusing. And that all of just understanding all that's wrapped up in mask wearing. But anything to add to that, Scott? Any clarifications or questions in the chat that we should address for people around this issue?
I don't have any clarifications. I have a wondering kind of challenge by choice. If folks are finding effective ways to communicate to staff, communities, or students, and you're willing to share any links, artifacts, messages, talking points that you're using. I think there are some folks who are feeling very comfortable, some folks who are feeling uncomfortable, and some folks who are feeling overwhelmed at the impact of the CDC's guidance. I know there's many nurses on the call. Many of you may have noticed the National Nurses Union asked the CDC to change its mind because they're so concerned about the gap between what the science tells us about what the vaccines offer and the actual state of vaccination in people at different ages. And that's really complicated to go explain to a normal person walking around on the street, much less the fact that it's changed. Jennifer got the bottom line exactly right. Like nothing is changing for schools in this immediate school year. But that doesn't mean you all don't need help trying to figure out how to explain that to people. And why. So if any of you are willing to offer any examples to each other of what you think might be going well about how to communicate through this particularly challenging window, that peer sharing is one of the high values of this kind of call. But otherwise, I don't have anything else to offer. I think you covered it really clearly, Jennifer. We changed. Yeah, go ahead.
I was giving some strategic wait time, but I know with 140 people on the call, sometimes unmuting doesn't always feel super safe. But just want to extend that invitation for anybody who wants to share anything around mask wearing that's working for you. Please do that. So Dion's just saying pretty matter-of-factly, they just posted the statement we shared there to staff and parent community, and no one's questioned it or asked about it. So that's certainly one story. I know that for some of you might be reading that saying, well, that's certainly not our lived experience. So just honoring that Oregon's a big place, and lots of ways that mask wearing plays out in our communities for sure. Okay, I'm going to transition us next to just graduation guidance update. This is pretty minor and small, and full transparency to everybody here. I actually have not yet had a chance to actually refer to OHA's indoor and outdoor guidance yet. So I don't know if those have been refreshed, but I want to be honest about that. I don't want to pretend to know something that I don't yet know. But what we did want to signal is that the graduation ceremony guidance, as you know, if you're working in a secondary school and or planning or preparing for graduation here shortly, aligns to guidance for indoor and outdoor entertainment establishments. So as Colt's message on Friday reminded everyone, it might have been Thursday actually, that he sent the message out, but he reminded folks to refer to that guidance and any other guidance coming from OHA for changes in the coming days that may reflect the governor's announcement. And I haven't been aware of any changes yet, but certainly if any of you are watching that and reading more carefully than I have yet, welcome your input for sure. Thank you, Ashley, as well, for putting those in the chat. We really appreciate it. Such a good team. Doesn't it feel good to work on a good team? It's like really satisfying. All right, Scott, now you want to talk about next year's guidance?
Sure. There's a whole nother year ahead of us.
I know.
Can you believe that? In the way that time is compressed. This school year, my middle school daughter told me this morning, do you know there's only 4 weeks left of middle school? We are working on a document I think we've referenced here a few times, but is getting closer to population and a little clearer. So we just want to kind of talk you through that. So we have been working with OHA, obviously amidst all the changes with the CDC and the governor's office, trying to get our best understanding of what we think the key aspects of any kind of ODE guidance, including the authorities that inform that guidance, would be to help you all navigate the year ahead. We are putting out what we're calling a discussion draft that will almost for sure look more like a slide deck and less like a document. The week of May 24th, so that's just next week. The information will get shared both through office hours, although our timing will be a little weird, so we'll figure out that because we don't have office hours on Memorial Day, and it won't be delivered on Monday. It's more likely to be Tuesday or Wednesday of that week. But it will go through a round of engagement in many different circles to get input and feedback, both on what we understand from OHA on the health and safety side, as well as things like instructional time requirements, attendance, enrollment, lots of other aspects of what is made up the executive order response. And a big part of that is sorting out what is maintained, what's released, what goes back to kind of normal rules and statute versus stays in some other form or authority. And then what follows. So that will be around a very robust discussion to get input. And then right now our plan is to release sometime in June, a kind of like, not the full detailed guidance that we have planned, but some kind of like, here's clearer signals, because we have heard from many folks, they need clearer information faster about what the kind of final contours are going to be. And then formally, our target date is July 22nd for releasing final detailed guidance. Our disposition is likely that the formal requirements will likely be smaller and thinner and almost completely tied to health and safety, but there will be certain changes that might happen in rule through the state board or other directions. So our job in that discussion draft is to try to kind of teach you all that framework that we're thinking of in order to get your feedback. I see questions in here about LPHAs. That's a good note for us. Ashley and Michelle, if you can keep track of that, that we make sure that we share with LPHAs the discussion draft. I'm betting that was already planned, but it's good for us to make sure. But that's basically what's in the works, coming pretty quickly. Jennifer, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that was great. I just, I do want to, just kind of reading through people's notes and feedback, because we listen to you and we pull your chats. And I do want to say that I think a theme that definitely came through from last week is just anxiety about the year to come. So there's no solve for that. There's no quick fix for that, other than to say, we just acknowledge that, you again are in this position where you have to plan, schedule, budget, and, kind of create the scaffolding and the architecture for the frame of a year next year. And you don't yet know what all the requirements will be. There's probably a lot more certainty than there was this time last year for planning the year ahead. but just appreciate your honesty and your candor with us around how anxious that makes you feel and the uncertainty that that creates for you, for your principals, for your teachers, for your community, for your students. So I just want to acknowledge that. There's no, again, there's nothing that we can do to fix that. Again, our approach to the draft guidance, I think, was our best effort at getting some clarity and some proposals out to you sooner. But there is no getting around the fact that it still does create uncertainty and anxiety for many of you, as you've expressed and named. So just want, like, from a human space of acknowledging what that feels like, just recognize that there's sort of an exhaustion around having to plan with those kinds of conditions at play. Scott, just transitioning Amanda's question, a lot of other questions around vaccinations, and just wanting to be really thoughtful and honest with folks that this is something that we know you're interested in, and something that we're likely not the right people to speak to about this topic.
You're so perfectly good at this. Full disclosure, because you all show up to this call because, like, hopefully it's helpful to you. And also part of our practice is to figure out how to, like, have it not feel like any other normal, ordinary ODE presentation. Earlier, Jennifer said, should we cover something about vaccination, like in the deck? And I was like, nope, if it comes up, we should talk about it. But we don't really have any business talking about how vaccines work for 12 to 15-year-olds. And yet we're following along with you. We know some things, so we're not trying to duck you, but I just want to own that. And then, of course, Amanda, you asked a great question. And I immediately in the chat go like, we should probably talk about this out loud. And Jennifer's like, what? So Amanda asks, like, we have a parent doctor who's volunteering to set up a vaccine clinic on campus for kids private school or public school. And I'm sorry, I don't know where to locate you if it's comfortable to share. Like, this is not our area of expertise. To Jennifer's point, I welcome any public health folks or nurses here. I think, coordination with your public health and a lot of health, safety sense about how that should go about and about navigating issues of parent consent. I think that the broad outlines, speaking about our partner agency, OHA, would be we want to cheer on people getting vaccinated. And we think that that's important. And we want to honor the science behind allowing 12 to 15-year-olds to get the vaccine and give no pause on that. The mechanisms of what you need to do and who you should talk to get that to happen and happen well and not create confusion in your community is a hard puzzle to solve and might be different context by context. So I don't have any specific, like, hard caveats, except just, like, coordinate and consult and make sure you're covering your bases. I'm sure there's someone on the call who's got better advice than what I just offered. So if anyone does, jump in.
Are you on camera?
Yep. Or, not be on mute. So Wendy, it looks like you got something for us.
Yeah. Just to go back to Jennifer, it is intimidating when there's 149 people on a call. So forgive me. We had a really successful event for vaccination at one of our high schools. And what was exciting was we paired with, and the principal actually organized this with our federally qualified clinic. And they came in and they used some of the COVID funds, and the kids were like, there's free food. It was really exciting. They were really energized. The kids were. We were very careful with our communication beforehand around consent to make sure that families were aware, because we don't want divisiveness within a family. We do have students that would want to be vaccinated when families might not want them to be vaccinated. So we were just really upfront with what the rules are around what we have to be able to provide them. And so that communication seems to have gone really well. And I was not there, but I know we had a chunk of not just kids. One parent came because the parent wanted to be vaccinated and the student didn't. So it was just really a neat situation. And I think, to get back to what you said, communication was really key to make that successful.
Thanks for being vulnerable, Wendy, and jumping in and sharing. And also, if you're willing and it's comfortable, or you can strip it out and send it and follow up, but if you'd be willing to share, like, an artifact, like a letter you communicated or an email or something, so people can see the language being used, I think people benefit by seeing any kind of tools from each other about how folks are moving through it. And I see other folks helping jump in with that as well. And thanks, Carol, for putting in the FAQ from OHA. And Corinna has offered some really helpful things as well. Anyone else want to offer anything on that front? Talk about being on a good team. Look how good we are. We got the whole state helping each other. It's a small miracle. We struggle sometimes, but we appreciate the good faith effort.
Oh, that's so cool. Look what Danny put in. So she's saying, I just asked Salem Health and they're coming to do a mobile clinic at our high school. So that's super helpful. And appreciation too, Scott, I think it's important to name it based on where you might live in the state. A lot of thoughtful care has to be done around an effort like this and in ways that keep students safe and keep them away from efforts that might be afoot or afloat to get them to not seek a vaccine. So just understand that there's a lot of dimension there that are very real and play out in very real ways in some of our communities. So appreciation to those of you who are also tending to those experiences. And again, with just incredible care around the conditions that we create for kids, whether it's standing up a vaccine clinic or welcoming them to school every day. And also just appreciation for the continued ideas and naming what solutions you've been able to secure. It's really helpful. And I know really helps others who are feeling stuck in what to do in this moment.
Jennifer, I think we've got a few different things in the chat that are kind of questions around, well, they're different in their nature. Let's start with face coverings and about outdoor face coverings on school grounds, in what settings, and see how much of that we can kind of cover.
Yeah, I think that's helpful, Scott. And just full transparency, lots of private messages, which is beautiful and appropriate. Some people are saying, don't really want to totally be public about this, but this is a question I have. So we just want to honor too, that's always an option. And if we're talking about things in the chat that you don't see, that's why. It's because it came to us in a private chat.
Our efforts to figure out how to pattern them without disclosing anyone. And it's a tricky thing because it's the more you're all willing to put things in the public chat, it's helpful for people to see each other's questions. And we also understand sometimes the desire for sensitivity. So hopefully we're good stewards of that, but we try to kind of find the right balance of that. And some things are in private chat, aren't for raising out loud. So we're always trying to discern that. So one question is just around like, so I'm gonna say one's for adults and one's for students with outdoor with face covering breaks. So I'm gonna take those in the opposite order. So in one of the last iterations of Ready Schools Safe Learners, it was allowed with a very specific protocol to be able to do an outdoor face covering break. And someone can pull RSSL and pull that in. If you missed that, that was in there way before the CDC and other things, but it's very specific about ways in which folks need to be stationary and where that's of a certain kind of value. And it's not something that you have to do, but it's something that you could do. So like that is the avenue for something like that, period, still the way that it is through the end of the school year. And then the question is about what about adults? And we've gotten lots of variations of complexity about adults. So one is about, well, what if there's no kids around inside the building? Well, so, previously already there was following workplace rules, particularly for folks, this was really built around CDL, but it was also like if you're in the school building in the morning, no kids are around, you're in your office, in your classroom with no one else around. During that time, a teacher could have their mask off, but the minute anyone would be coming, already something that could happen beforehand in very specific ways, and that could continue to happen following the general workplace guidance with no interaction. But the idea that vaccinated adults, even teachers, could move around the school building and have their face coverings off is not allowed under the guidance. It's still not allowed under the guidance. And the same thing is true for being outdoors on school grounds with adults. It's None of that changes. I know that people might want it to change, and obviously the CDC guidance might make it more confusing to change, but none of that changes for this school year, right? Where it gets complicated is where you have evening community events on school grounds, and folks have negotiated that space in complicated ways around how much they enforce Ready School Safe Learners school stuff into their kind of evening after hour school ground space. Our rules and guidance would basically suggest you that you treat them all the same, but we know that many of you operationally have made distinctions, and I don't think we can get into that much weedy detail here. But broadly speaking, that's where you need to be at until the end of the school year, and we'll wait and see if there will be any changes for the summertime. Because the graduation ceremony guidance is aligned to the governor and OHA's guidance and not Ready School Safe Learners, that's a venue that may change. I don't want to tease anybody, but I also don't want to pretend that that's not a real thing everyone's chattering and talking about. So that's possible. And remember that that's anchored not to RSSL, but governor's guidance. But as it relates to anything related to RSSL, the same rules, same boundaries from now to the end of the school year.
Scott, getting some suggestions around things that people would like to see changed related to that. But I heard you say really clearly that RSSL will not change related to mask wearing through the end of the year. So I just want to clarify that there are places where people are saying, gosh, it'd be really nice if they weren't required for PE or recess. But I'm hearing Scott say mask wearing what's in RSSL now will stay through the end of the year. So I just want to make sure.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the share. This is where it gets so complicated. So one, I don't work nor decide what the Oregon Health Authority does. And second, there are ongoing puzzles that we're getting solved pre this. Technically, athletics does not live in Ready School Safe Learners. I know it creates confusion and alignment with PE and in-school activities. There is some discussion at a fine-grained detail in the same way we would otherwise iterate RSSL about whether some PE aspects will align to the changes in athletics, because as someone said to me this last week, like the after-school basketball team came to the principal and said, how come we don't have to wear our masks when we're playing basketball after school, but we have to wear them during PE class? And as someone who taught middle school students, I understand that that'd be very hard to explain unless you're willing to give a deep discourse on state policy and the Department of Education, OHA, and the governor's office, and like jurisdiction and authority, which I don't think middle schoolers would want to stay around for. So, so there is a kind of like, there might be some small puzzles or changes. You should keep giving us feedback. The team that works on that might make small fine-grained changes. But the architecture of RSSL, the main things around face covering, the CDC's guidance, and I say this knowing that every time I say anything like this, it can change. So everything that I know is that it will not change for the last few weeks of fall in terms of the architecture of that. And that's what Colt's message was about on Thursday and what we're trying to signal for you here. And I say that always knowing that, you know, things can puzzle their way to a different place. But that's the best I can offer you in terms of what to count on, what to teach, what to share with people. And then we'll see what happens to the end of the year. I do think some question marks about summer are in play in a different way than they were a week ago. And we'll have to see how that plays out and keep you posted as we learn more.
It's really helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. I'm just trying to figure out what to pull next, which is always the art of this time together. I'm wondering, I'm hoping too that Morgan had a question, Scott, and I just think it's worth reframing because it goes back to something we talked about earlier. It's because it's around graduation, and Morgan wonders, do you have any updates or clarification on outdoor graduation and mask, especially on drive-in style and other distance events?
So I think the most disciplined thing I could say right now, Morgan, is to follow the link. Ashley, maybe you can put it in again to the outdoor guidance, the outdoor sector guidance. Those things are going to stay cross-mapped. And we know that that's hard as an event planner, but they're going to stay mapped to each other. And if there's a change, that's where the change is going to come from. But whatever you're trying to decide if you can do it or not do it, that's what you're following as your compass. That's really kind of the best thing I can offer you at this time. On the outdoor one. If you're doing an indoor ceremony, then you follow the indoor sector guidance from OHA and the governor's office.
Also, just hearing the sentiment of one of our superintendents saying, "Gosh, I really hope that we can accommodate more students and have fewer graduation ceremonies." And so, yeah, we understand that there's that sentiment is shared among many, and there's a lot of both pressure from community to get the graduation ceremony right, and pressure from students, and just the desire to make it special and meaningful and get everybody together. So understand that entirely. And again, OHA sets those guidelines. We can bring feedback to them, but those are places that OHA really sets the boundary lines for.
Looking through questions, lots of good feedback. Thank you for, we take all the feedback, we trace it, make sure it gets passed along. Sue, Levine, you asked about the out-of-state travel restrictions. So this might be a bit broken recordy, but the travel advisory from OHA, as far as I understand, is still in place. It is still a recommended advisory. Many folks, when it first came out back in December, in some ways did what the governor was hoping for and make it part of their own workplace expectations to follow that advisory. But it is advisory, it is advice, and it is a good question. And I'm looking to see if I have any OHA colleagues on with us today to see if it is coming down as a recommendation or advisory. And I'm not aware of that, but it's a good question we could take home and ask. But any OHA folks on who could answer? Scanning. I don't see anyone on today with us. So that's the best I think I can offer. Okay.
Scott, just one thing I want to put into this space that's always important is to really is related to summer planning, and this idea that so this is just inspiration and reminder, nothing more than that. But this notion that school nurses play a really pivotal role in planning for summer programming, and so just to remember the important place that school nurses have in the constellation of your school district and planning, and really they're critical components that they play in thinking about, designing for, and ensuring student health and safety over the summer. So we're hearing some things that in some places that's happening, in some places maybe not yet. And so just a reminder to link arms with school nurses and bring them into the conversations. Without question, that'll make the quality of your summer programming better, and most especially for the health and safety of kiddos.
Way to be responsive to Corinna, Jennifer. That was very good. Corinna, do you want to? Can we say any? We should find ways to say it with even more amplification. Like school nurses can be very, very helpful, and if you have one, you should use one. And if you don't have one, you should call the Nurses Association, or find a nurse, phone a nurse, tell people to become a nurse. And I'm being playful, but I mean it seriously. Like I think that we have planning going on, and where we could use nurses' help, we should connect the dots as best we can. And I think I'm just echoing Jennifer, but trying to kind of underscore the point. So.
Scott, I'm noticing this is a second question about school plays and class performances. And I think the earlier one was answered in the chat by Alexa. So thank you for that, Alexa. And she was sharing that if the play is outside of school hours, it would fall under the outdoor entertainment guidance. So hopefully that addresses Dion's question.
I didn't track that in the chat. Alexa, were you able to provide the performing arts guidance inside RSSL for school time?
I'll grab that.
Okay, because I think you want to work with both pieces of in-school hours and out-of-school hours. And
I think, Dion, in the description, if I'm understanding what you're writing here, I don't believe that masks can be removed in the description that you're providing. So I just wanted to clarify that. Scott, are you aligned with that answer?
maybe you could read Dion's or.
Sure.
Oh, I got it. I found it. So 336 in the chat.
Yep. Sorry about that.
That's okay. If a class play performance is after school, then we're not following RSSL, but indoor. Well, yeah. So step one, Dion, I can't remember public, private, but there could be some distinction. But if it is a school sanctioned after school activity, you have formally, you are like athletics under the under the governor's kind of sector guidance for after school athletics. That said, our best counsel often to people is to try to align RSSL to that guidance as a moment of practice, but formally you're under that. When we, it's definitely a useful resource for you to read what is in the performing arts guidance from RSSL, because it's far more detailed about what is actually a good practice in this type of, it's more specific than what is in the governor and OHA's one as it relates to kind of this type of activity. So I really encourage you to look at it, but then formally you're under the governor's guidance. And a quick side tour I hope is useful, not hopefully just filler, but I think a constant puzzle for us now, and I don't know, we'll see going forward, has always been, how do you have a coherent set of rules in the school day and coherent set of rules for following the school day, knowing that you're also trying to conform the rules for all kinds of other community-wide activities, whether you're in a reasonably small town or a medium-sized town or a larger city in the state. You've got gymnastics and ballet and bands and all kinds of other things that go on. And so the navigation that was being made was, well, you can make the school day make sense and make after school make sense, but then it will be misaligned to what everyone else can do in the community. Or you can align to the community factor after school, but then that can create gaps with the school. And the second one is what the governor's office and OHA decided to go with. And so the guidance changes, and it's so that it's basically everyone's playing by the same set of ideas in all of those spaces, but that's why it can feel off kilter with the school day guidance, just as a, like, sometimes it's helpful to have the like mental rationale for why it's that way. So hopefully that was helpful. Kimberly, yes, as just a confirmation of that. If you're holding a after school activity, now, if it's a school-based activity for credit and it's the school running it, I would, you got to talk to your own legal counsel about what rules you follow. We're not allowed to give you guidance. If it were me, I would probably follow RSSL if it's a credit-bearing kind of thing. If it's an after-school activity or athletics, we've clearly said that lives under the governor's sector guidance, and that's what you would follow. Yeah. All right, ODE team, other patterns that you see in the chat or things that need attention for today? Carolina, I can't speak to the governor's one as it relates to the RSSL in school day ones. That's because there wouldn't be spectators within the RSSL framework. But as it relates to the governor's guidance, there could be, and you want to look at that, it keeps getting updated and I don't have it committed to memory at this point. Karen Patton, you want us to answer Becky's question. Becky, you want to unmute and tell us your question, or we'll scan for?
I've got it, Scott. I queued you in the doc,
so-
but there's a lot to track. It's all good. So here's Becky's question. She says, can you clarify what guidance ESD should use requiring masking requirements, specifically ESDs that do not have any classrooms or students? And I think, Becky, if I'm getting this right or inferring your intent, I believe you're asking for the employees while they're on campus working at the ESD.
That's correct. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So Becky, in a setting where an ESD has no students, classrooms, or programs at all, they should be following the workplace sector guidance. But if they have any students on campus, so in any kind of aspect of that facility, I understand that the kind of working agreement is that they follow RSSL, and that's what's written into RSSL as an authority. But if they're only, or like another example would be a school district wrote us asking about like the facilities warehouse of a particular place that has no kids, no adults ever. I can't remember, it's like very codified kind of thing. And we said, okay, you're gonna follow the workplace sector guidance. So there can be some puzzles like that.
So if we on occasion bring in, like we do evaluations for birth to 5-year-olds, then
You should be, well, birth to 5-year-old, you'd have some puzzle around early learning in RSSL. We could talk more. That one might be one to workshop outside of the whole call.
But Becky, feel free to send that question to Scott or to myself or the COVID inbox too, because it sounds like a worthy question. We want to help support you get an answer to it.
Yeah. Vani, the question you just asked is important to give an update around. So Vani asked about, will OSHA consider changing the rule on COVID-19? I'm going to try not to go on too long about this. And I can't remember how long back we did like a 15, 20-minute thing around rulemaking to try to explain it. So I'll try to give the abbreviated version. But so, the legislature passes laws, we call them statute, they get signed by the governor. Then administrative rules get passed that fill in all the fine details and missing. Different bodies have governance. In Oregon in education, that's the State Board of Education. OSHA does that same thing when it comes to health, like workplace and safety rules, and they have their own governing administrative board that reviews rules. Technically, in the world of administrative rulemaking, any rule of any kind that's short-term and comes up without deep community engagement and meeting lots of expectations for administrative rulemaking is called a temporary rule. It can only last for 6 months. In order to become permanent, it has to go through the administrative body and becomes administrative rule. And but just because it's a permanent rule, permanent rules can be time stamped, so they can expire at a certain time, or they can be changed very frequently, not tied to the legislature. So in response to COVID-19, OSHA took the frameworks that OHA had built with executive authority from all kinds of sectors and began to put them into administrative rule, first as temporary rules, and then had to move through a permanent rulemaking process. You saw lots of response all across the state and in newspapers, often misconfusing, not really following how all that architecture works, but also thousands of comments from concerned folks with all kinds of perspectives. OSHA has made permanent rules, and OSHA has communicated that they'll keep those permanent rules updated as best they can as things evolve with COVID. And they've also been on the record saying that they will end those permanent rules when the time comes. When that time comes will not certainly be in the immediate near future, but it would come at some point in response to what's happening with OHA and other things. So the current state of play is everything is trying to stay mapped, and they're trying to keep those rules updated as the kind of permanent kind of authority in more normal ways of how the state does business. And you'll want to keep following OSHA and its kind of rules process. And I don't see a real change to that architecture for a while. But most of that's happening in relationship to trying to get things into that normal architecture and out of governor's executive orders is like the transfer you're seeing kind of happen. That was hopefully that's a much faster explainer than I offered last time, but hopefully helpful to follow.
All right, Scott, you ready for our next question? Are you seeing it?
No, help me out.
I put it in the chat. It's also on the doc.
Oh, I see. I got it. I read that as like next time we gather. I was like, okay. Is there a difference? Is there any different expectations of quarantine length for in-school versus out-of-school activities? We have families who are quarantined for school, sending students outside activities while they're quarantined. To the best of my knowledge and understanding, when just recently OHA did their 14 days requirement period, that was all sectors, all forums, all the time, no distinctions. And Wendy, you nodding your head and other nurses nodding their head makes me feel like I did my homework right. So I'm feeling
The
good about it.
investigative guidelines say, note, shortening of quarantine is not permissible
Yeah.
in any setting.
Wendy, could you add that just in written form in the chat too? I think that's super helpful. People have that language. Thank you so much for that, and appreciation for the question as well. Joanne, thank you. Joanne's putting in the COVID-19 inbox. I know this feels a little impersonal. It doesn't go to one of us particular, but we promise it does go to us. We huddle twice every week around these questions and make sure that they get a response. And so if you do have a question that wasn't answered here that you'd like to address again, feel free to utilize that email so that you can get just-in-time response, hopefully, to what you're looking for. And thank you, Alexa Pearson, for helping out Sienna, if I have your name right, and posting that performance arts updated guidance in the chat. Much appreciation. Okay, I am not tracking any unanswered questions. Did solve for some things in private chat. Just appreciate all the dilemmas people are navigating, Scott. I would just say that there is a lot of rich pushback that people are providing for administrators, saying, well, how come I have to do this? And what's the science behind it? Both from educators and from community members and students themselves. So hearing definitely the challenges that you're faced in helping to uphold RSSL. No easy solution there, but just want to continue to say that your individual private chat scenarios reinforce that for sure. And thank you very much for putting the language of the 14-day quarantine that's required. That's very helpful. I think that was Wendy. So thank you, Wendy, for sharing that.
There was a question in private chat. I just want to make sure it got addressed about that. It says the most recent guidance on graduation is dated March 19th. Given recent events, is there a newer guidance that I'm missing? And so I just want to make sure folks know that there's not a newer guidance, but that within that guidance, you can link to those OHA links, and maybe we could put those in again for, since graduation happens outside of a school day, you would follow the OHA, and those links should still work even when it's up with, and they'll be updated if they're updated.
All right, I'm up for staying around, but I also think we should, if people don't have more things, we should declare victory. I'm not sure we've had the office hours end early. You all could go stare in the sun for a minute. Well, there's no sun. You can go outside and breathe fresh air for a minute or something.
No, Scott and I were going to have you sing some karaoke. You just don't know that yet. So this is like the surprise last 10 minutes of RSSL office hours. May 17th is going to go down in infamy. No, in all seriousness, I want to appreciate a question I'm getting around where is the workplace sector guidance? Can someone help me and put that in the chat, which is a great question because some of those can be a little obscure and hard to find. And I actually don't know where that lives either. So Scott does. I can tell it by his face. He's going to go find it.
I'm going to grab it. Unless someone else gets it, someone else might get there before me. Feel free. Give me a second.
There is some friendly competition. I don't know if this exists in your work life where people are like, who's going to put it in the chat first?
I'll tell you right now, there are a couple of reopening advisors who are very fast, but Colt Gill, he's hands down. I don't know how he is the fastest link finder that I know. It's the qualification to be the superintendent of public instruction. You have to be really good at getting links quickly.
He was a tech director, Scott. I'm thinking that's like,
ridiculous.
It's like some apprenticeship built up there.
It's ridiculous how good he is. I'm almost to it. Give me a minute.
All right. Well, Scott's finding that link to workplace guidance, and thank you again for letting us know what you need. Trisha Mooney.
Oh, Trisha for the win.
Oh.
Let's make sure we went to the same place.
Just an invitation. We do gather one more time in May. As you know, we won't meet on Memorial Day, but we will meet on the 24th, which is next Monday. So we'll send you a prize. We'll send it to you and then you have to wear it next Monday. That's the condition on which we issue prizes. So just want to invite your questions, input, anything you particularly would hope to hear in RSSL office hours for next week. We also, in addition, Scott talked earlier about we're in this process of creating discussion draft guidance that previews what will be required in the coming year. Along with that, we're trying to figure out what's the best way, what should we do with RSSL office hours? As you well know, this is something new that we tried out and experimented with this year. I think just candidly, we were sort of surprised to see the response. I think we expected like 3 people to show up. And it's continued to draw quite an attendance, and certainly not trying to overblow its success, or there's no like humble brag hidden within that, but we are just trying to figure out what would be helpful for you most genuinely in continuing potentially the summer. I know many of you are hoping to get a little bit of a summer this year, and we cheer that on, but just any kind of ideas, inspiration, requests around RSSL office hours and the direction that they might go in the coming year would be really helpful to hear your ideas. And then of course, just grounded into like in a week, what would you like to hear topics covered?
The next office hours, we might do something where people can give us a quick, or we could use a Zoom survey to get like a quick pulse check on office hours appetite and interest in the time ahead, so we can think about a way to get there.
Can I ask a follow-up question to one they put in the chat? And I agree that we shouldn't be the ones monitoring all outside groups. Is there, if I have frustrated parents, for example, we have kids who have gone to things and exposed other kids and now they're out of school. And so parents are frustrated about people not following the guidance, and organizations allowing that to happen or not being as organized maybe as we are because of our direct connection to our local public health agency. So is there a protocol and answer that, I mean, I was like, well, I've said that's not on us. We don't control Little League or whatever it is. Is there an appropriate place to refer them other than they went to the agency and they said, well, it's on the coaches to do that and decide? And that just seems like that's way too nebulous.
Yeah, it's a challenging question because you get at essentially, and I'm sometimes reminded like all of this is built just off of people, right? So we agree to follow rules and laws together. We agree to processes together. We lead or don't lead through things together. And you can build as many systems and build as many maps, but it just comes down to people. And, in a given place, if your local public health authority is feeling out of capacity, meaning if there remains a lot of stress and strain on the public health authority, and what people are looking for is an avenue of kind of complaint, it can be hard because you're trying to actually figure out how to ignite people's collective ways to solve problems, and everyone wants to point at someone else who's responsible. And so, you get these situations where like an associational thing, I don't want to pick on Little League, but like folks go like, well, it's not ours. We're not trained. We don't know how to solve it. Someone else should give us guidance. The public health is going like, we're too full. Like we can't do it. The school's like, it's not ours. Parents and families are like, well, basically like who runs this thing? The city's like, and everyone's pointing at someone else. And in the midst of it, kids are getting sick. Right. And so I think my vantage point is like, it is not anyone's job to be someone else's minder, you calling other people out. But I think it is a play. I believe that we all have a certain responsibility to lead in the community that we live in. So to the extent in which we try to name that kind of puzzle and then figure out who gets in a room with whom to figure out so kids don't get sick, like everybody should be all in for that as best they can with the energy they have. We don't have endless energy. But to the extent you can flip the switch to say, okay, how do we protect the kids? And figure out who huddles up around that. But there's no clean answers. When you get down to the detail level, it's just people in roles who are doing the best they can to figure it out. That's kind of the best.
And I think that's the frustration, is people sometimes feel like if they say something, then they just become the complainer, and it becomes an issue of like, oh, it's that parent that just wants to complain about something.
Right. And I get the way it's hot in communities, and this is where it all boils down to, like, can we listen to each other? And then you do have all the, like, you're getting my kid sick. And, it's just, at the end of the day, like, that's where it boils down to how can we all lead and listen to each other?
Thank you.
No, that's not easy.
No.
Like, that's just, I don't know any other way through that ticket.
I just like the word you used, thicket. I thought that was a good word for the moment, a thicket. And hopefully there's some like ripe blackberries every once in a while in this little hair thicket, but an apt description for sure. And also just wanted to give Kurt Scholl some friendly teasing around your code name there. That was very clever. I was like, who's the iPad Pro number 2? That's really very clever. Then you like showed your face, and then I was like, oh, now I know who this is. So I'm gonna steal that trick.
My secretary would be iPad Pro number 1.
I love it. iPad Pro number 2. That's gonna be your new secret spy agent name for life. All right. Well, big appreciation to everybody. We so value the time with you. We learn from you. We're humbled by the work that you do, and hope that in some small way this makes your work easier. And just thanks for spending time with us, and we'll see you next week. Take good care.